Hi folks, happy Friday to one and all. I trust you've survived the week, not been found guilty of any felony offences by a jury of your peers, that kind of thing. No? Jolly good. Let's begin with what I've read this week. I finished Edge of Human by K.W. Jeter. This is the sequel to the movie Blade Runner and by extension to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, of course. Jeter doubles down on the lingering question of whether Deckard is himself a replicant by having nearly everyone in the book at one point or another be accused of being, turn out to be, or deny being a replicant. He also introduces the concept of a templant, the original human upon which a line of replicant copies is based. Not content with that, he also adds in humans that believe they're replicants. That all adds to the fun. Is a character a templant and thus just looks like a known replicant, or are they another model of the same line of replicants, or is a character actually a human that's just convinced themselves that they're a replicant, or a straight up human? Jeter does a good job of keeping us guessing throughout. The book opens with Deckard holed up in a log cabin out in the boonies somewhere, having fled at the end of the movie with Rachel, the beautiful replicant. Because replicants have a limited lifespan of 4 years, Deckard and Rachel are eking out their time together by putting her into hibernation from time to time. Deckard gets an offer he can't refuse and is pulled back into LA to hunt down the fabled sixth replicant, a missing member of Roy Batty's crew. The bulk of the book deals with his mission, dealing with layers of confusion, deception, conflicting loyalties, conspiracy, you name it. I should confess at this point though, I haven't actually read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So for me, Edge of Human was a sequel to the Blade Runner movie, which I've watched many times, and it functioned very well in that capacity, I thought. I enjoyed the noir overtones of the book. I could easily imagine Harrison Ford as Deckard in this book too, plus some of the other characters familiar from the movie. I liked how Deckard was almost without agency in this book. He was mostly a puppet on other people's strings, and all in the service of somehow extending Rachel's lifespan so that they could have more time together. I liked the twist in the tale towards the end. I didn't see it coming, and I left the book with a smile on my face. So Edge of Human was a quick, fun read, and I shall definitely be back for the next one at some point. And I'll also be looking out for more of K.W. Jeter's work. I like his writing. I finished Cage of Souls by Adrian Tchaikovsky on audiobook. I wasn't sure I would get through it all this week, but it was so good that I found I was looking for excuses to listen to it. For example, I spent a few hours longer gardening on Sunday than I intended to. The summary version here is that I really enjoyed this book. Cage of Souls is a dying Earth type book. We're in the far future. The sun is dying, possibly of natural causes, possibly because of some ill-advised human intervention at some point in the past. The known world is reduced to one city, Shadrapar, home to at most a couple of 100,000 people. The sea is dreadfully polluted. The land around Shadrapar is desert, scattered with relics of times past, the source of many trinkets and valuable items. There's also a jungle upriver from Shadrapar, which is the location of the island, a prison of sorts, home to criminals, debtors and political prisoners. Our protagonist is Stefan Advani, recently consigned to a lengthy term in the islands, the result of crossing someone that he shouldn't have crossed. As the story progresses, we get lengthy flashbacks to Stefan's past life, allowing us to get more familiar with both Stefan and Shadrapar. We're introduced to a large cast of characters, fellow prisoners, old friends, new friends, enemies, warders, scholars, criminals, corrupt officials, lots of people. And this might have been challenging, but between Tchaikovsky's excellent world building and David Thorpe's really compelling narration, I was seldom confused and mainly very much enjoyed luxuriating in this strange place. Evolution has gone bananas, accelerated by the challenging environmental conditions, and there are technology relics all over the place, most mysterious, but some well understood. Stefan is a likeable main character, and we grow a little with him as he develops coping mechanisms for his time on the island, accumulating loyal friends along the way. I've mentioned the narration, but it's really worth saying again, if you haven't read this book yet and you like a dying Earth story, then I'd really recommend listening to it on the audiobook if you can. I'm sure I'd have enjoyed just reading the physical book, although that would have been difficult as I don't actually have a copy. But the narration was so good, I think it added a good 10% to my enjoyment. It's very, very good. This week I also finished The Other Wind by Ursula Le Guin, and this is the fifth Earthsea book, added 30 years after the original trilogy and 11 years after Tahanu, the fourth book. I read the first four a couple of years ago and I enjoyed them, but only retain a dim memory of them. I think I would have benefited from a fresher recollection, but didn't find it too much of a problem to go in fairly cold to this book. As I read, I found I was recalling characters and situations from the other books as they were referred to in The Other Wind. And some of the Earthsea favourites are here: Ged, although not much, Tenar and Tahanu, Ged's wife and adopted daughter, and King Lebanon, plus there are dragons and a mysterious Kargish princess. A new character, Alda Amenda, is tormented by dreams of the wall, the boundary between life and death. After a bit of a trek, he visits with Ged, retired archmage, who, after numerous plums are consumed, it would make sense if you read it, advises Alder to tell his story to King Lebanon. There ensues some court scenes, the irritatingly positive and good King Lebanon. The dragons are in a massive huff. The world is out of balance as a result, and Lebanon must find a solution. I quite enjoyed being back in this world. Le Guin's writing is wonderful, of course, and it was a quick and not especially taxing read. I also got about halfway through Hexarchate Stories, Yunhar Lee's collection set in the same universe as Nine Fox Gambit and its other 2 books. And for me, they mainly served as a reminder of the world building in those books. Some of the characters are common, although much earlier in their lives. I read Machineries of Empire several years ago, and whilst there were a little hard work in that there's very little in the way of exposition or info dumping, you kind of have to figure it out as you go. I remember enjoying them. I didn't love them or anything, but I was happy to read them and finish the trilogy. And because this is a short story collection, I don't feel obliged to finish it. And by the time you watch this, I may have got through a few more of these stories, but come the end of the day, I will stick it back on the shelves and think no more of it. I have plenty of things on my June TBR that I'd rather be reading. Talking of which, once I finished Cage of Souls on Wednesday, I jumped straight into my next audiobook, Demon in White, the 3rd Sun Eater book. I was too tight-fisted to cough up an Audible credit to listen to it there, so I'm using my free hours on Spotify. I reckon I'll run out of free hours about halfway through the book, so I'll switch to this, the actual book, at that point. I'm only 7 or 8 chapters out of I don't know how many dozens, but I'm already happy to be back in this world, and the narration is pretty good too. More on this next week, assuming that I get it done by then, and I very well might not, because it's pretty chunky. I think that is a pretty damn good reading week. 3 whole books, a bunch of short stories, and a head start on my June TBR. Boom. How about you? How did you get on in the reading department? Anything that you'd recommend? Do let us know in the comments. Channel stuff then. Subscribers are at 2,826, which is up 21 on last week. If you're one of those 21, or if you've stumbled drunkenly on my channel for the first time today, then a huge welcome to you. I'm John. I focus on reading, collecting and chatting about science fiction, old and new. There's over 150 videos on the channel now, so do check out the playlists. You're sure to find something interesting. Comment of the week this week was from Monty Adkins, who poo-pooed the idea of cities floating in the upper atmosphere of Venus, as mentioned by Ken MacLeod, instead advocating that we do the same thing here on Earth, quoting a design study from the 1990s that proposed giant airships a mile across. I'm not convinced. I say go big or go home. I want to live on, or more accurately, above Venus. Thanks to Monty for taking the time to leave a comment, and to everyone else that does the same. Much appreciated, as always. Let's take a look at what was on the channel this week. On Monday, there was thrilling footage, thrilling, I say, of me choosing my TBR for June. The bingo balls of fate choose one of my 59 shelves, and then I choose a book from that shelf and then repeat. It's basically Las Vegas in video form, but without the tigers or the dancing girls. I'm excited by the books that I've ended up with on my somewhat ambitious pile for June, and I'm keen to get stuck in. Yesterday, there was an interview with Ken MacLeod. Ken and I had a chat on Sunday afternoon, and we talked about his early career, some of his favourite science fiction books, his thoughts on the state of science fiction writing these days, and his most recent books. And there were some nice anecdotes from his writing process and his friendship with school friend Ian Banks. Along the way, we get a little overview of his books as well. This was my first author interview, but there will be more. I have a couple more lined up in the coming months. Interestingly, this is my worst performing video for some time in terms of views. I gather from talking to a couple of other booktubers that this is not uncommon for author interviews. So hopefully it's nothing to do with my interview skills or with Ken as a draw. Regardless, it was fun to speak to him, and I got a little fanboy thrill from speaking to an actual honest-to-God science fiction author. Life goals right there. What did I watch this week? I watched Joseph Reed's books give a very good overview of Robert Heinlein's work, and not entirely positively either. I also watched Liminal Spaces conduct a tour of some of his extensive library. I do love to have a good nose around other people's shelves, although it is very tough to be unable to kind of reach through the screen and pull out a book for a closer look. Lastly, I watched Thomas at SFF 180 do a nice video on post-apocalyptic books, mostly, I think, if I remember right, from the 1950s. Some are books that I've read and enjoyed myself, and some I now want to read. As usual, I put the links to these videos in the description so that you can find them easily. Do check them out. On the book buying front, last Friday, after recording last week's update, I hit my local Aladdin's Cave of Science Fiction, the Oxfam bookshop in Woodley, and came away a bit disappointed. I mean, I wasn't empty-handed or anything, but just a handful of books were bought. I have taken delivery of a few books this week though, including a nice signed Larry Niven, which has taken a few weeks to arrive from the US, and one or two other things too, including a very nice Asimov Robots book in hardback, a steal, at £3.90, including postage. The running total for the next haul video currently stands at 32 books. Yikes. Looking ahead to the coming week on the channel, without specifying too precisely when they'll arrive, you can expect to see a wrap-up of May's reading, including a declaration of Book of the Month. And I'm working on a look at some of the seminal works of the 1950s, putative second golden age of science fiction, which may also arrive in the coming week. I also have in mind a kind of sampler video, a taster menu, the highlights from May's videos, but that'll take a little bit of editing together and I may not have time for it. We shall see. Reading wise, I shall be continuing with Demon in White. Saturday will see me out on the trails for 6 or 7 hours and I shall be a captive audience for audiobook listening, so I will get a good chunk through it, subject to the battery life of my earphones, that is. In actual books, I'm going to whip through The Tusks of Extinction, which is a very slender novella. I'm already a couple of chapters in. It's not going to take very long to finish. And then I will tackle Mother of Eden, which is book 2 of the Eden trilogy, which I'm really looking forward to reading. And if I get through both of those, I'll switch gears and read The Star Kings, which is the first of Jack Vance's Demon Princess books. And if I get through those 3, I think I'll be doing pretty well. As always, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. And until next time, goodbye for now.